Hey, it's Lena. You've clicked on this video, you read the title of it, you know that I'm going to be giving you 10 podcast recommendations, so there's really no need for a longer intro than that. I'm just going to go ahead and get started. The first podcast I'm recommending is called What We Said, and I've been listening to this one for years now. I don't even know how many episodes I would have listened to by now, but it's hosted by two best friends, JC and Chelsea, and they talk about a bunch of things including health and business, life advice, relationships, and they also have some episodes where they'll read some of their listener stories, which can be super entertaining. They really just have a variety of episodes, so whether you're in the mood for something more motivational with helpful life tips or more of a funny, lighthearted kind of conversation, you can pick whatever fits your mood the best. I think they have a really great presence, and it's really obvious that they're really close friends, so their friendship dynamic is really great. They also have a great sense of humor, so sometimes I'll actually find myself laughing out loud, which is a lot to say for a podcast, so I would definitely recommend listening to it. The next podcast that I'm recommending is called The School of Greatness, and this one is hosted by Lewis Howes, who is a former pro athlete and a New York Times bestseller. He interviews a bunch of the most successful people in the world from a bunch of different areas, so people in sports and business, health, science, entertainment, etc. And he also does a bunch of solo episodes, which can also be packed with a lot of information. I find that the podcast can be really inspiring and insightful, and it actually gives you actionable tips and advice to apply into your own life. I recently listened to an episode on procrastination, and it definitely called me out on some of the things that I do, but I find that that's sometimes what we actually need. So if you're looking for a personal growth kind of motivational podcast, then this one's definitely for you. The third podcast I'm recommending is Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard, and obviously it's hosted by Dax Shepard, but he also has a co-host, Monica Padman, and it's basically a bunch of interviews with people from a variety of disciplines. So there's musicians and authors and academics, but mostly I find that they interview a lot of actors, which as someone in the acting/film industry, it's something that I personally find really interesting. But I'm sure even if you're not in it, you would still find it super entertaining to hear from some of your favorite actors. It tends to be pretty high-profile guests. I'll put up some of the names on the screen here so you can get an idea of the kind of people that they interview. But they talk to them about their life stories and about how they got to where they were, the kinds of challenges and setbacks that they had to face. I love how in-depth some of these interviews get because it really gets me to gain a new perspective on these people and just see them in a new light. I think the first episode I listened to was actually the very first episode of the podcast, I believe. It's the one with Kristen Bell, who also happens to be Dax's wife. And since then, I've listened to a bunch more episodes, so I definitely recommend it. Next up is Anything Goes with Emma Chamberlain, and I feel like most people who spend time on YouTube know who she is, but in case you don't, she is a huge YouTuber with over 10 million subscribers, and she is incredibly successful. She's collaborated with some really big brands. She's also been on Time Magazine and Cosmopolitan and Vogue. She also has her own coffee brand, Chamberlain Coffee, but even though she's like a millionaire, there's something about her that's still really relatable. And as the title of the podcast implies, anything goes on it. So whether she's talking about how she's feeling, or fashion, or creativity, or anxiety, social media, basically whatever she wants to talk about just goes on the podcast. I really love her personality. She's really open and honest, and it's just unapologetically herself, which can be really refreshing to listen to. And I don't know, there's something about the podcast that's just really comforting. Number 5 is another self-help/personal development podcast, and this one is called The Mindset Mentor. It's hosted by Rob Dial. It's really helpful if you're looking for some motivation and some focus and a better sense of direction in life. Rob will pull from neurology and psychology and kind of helps you understand your brain and your body better so you can learn the best ways to make changes towards becoming a better version of yourself. He covers topics like procrastination and discipline, the law of attraction / manifestation, goal setting, confidence, and so on. Most episodes are about 20 to 25 minutes long, so he gets really straight to the point, and sometimes that's the perfect length for a podcast. But if you're looking for something a little bit longer, sometimes he also does some interviews and brings guests on the show, and those episodes are about like an hour to an hour and a half long. And as the title would suggest, it definitely does help with my mindset, and if you do decide to listen, I hope that it does the same for you. If you're looking for another lifestyle podcast, I would recommend that you listen to Pretty Basic. It's hosted by Alicia Marie and Remy Ashton, who both have really big followings on YouTube, and actually just a really big social media following overall. But you might recognize one or both of them from the very early kind of YouTube days. Their podcast is really just a lot of fun to listen to. Their friendship is obviously really genuine, and so they bounce off each other really well. They have some episodes where they have lighthearted conversations, others where they give some advice, and you also get to learn a lot more about the behind the scenes of YouTube and being an influencer, if that kind of stuff is interesting to you. I will say this is a podcast that you don't need to be super engaged with, just because it's one of those light, chatty podcasts that's just really easy to listen to. It's just two people having a conversation, and sometimes that's all I need from a podcast. I feel like I just said podcast like a gazillion times. We're just gonna move on. Next up is a paranormal and true crime podcast. It has both of them in one. It's called And That's Why We Drink. But full disclosure, I actually haven't listened to it in quite some time now. But when I was listening to it, I was listening to it fairly frequently, so I feel okay recommending it to you. I just remember it got to the point where I was like, okay, this is way too many murder and ghost stories for my brain to handle. I kind of go through phases when it comes to paranormal / true crime stuff, but I figured some of you might be into it right now. So it's hosted by two friends, Em and Christine, and I believe that it's Em that tells the paranormal story, and then Christine will tell the true crime story, so you'll get both of them within one episode. And they just have some really good banter and commentary, and they kind of joke around, so it makes a dark subject a little bit lighter. The next podcast is Growing with the Flow by Nina Florence, who you might recognize from her aesthetic videos on YouTube. If you don't know who she is, then I definitely recommend that you check out her channel and obviously this podcast. I just find it really refreshing. She has a really calming, peaceful voice and presence, and she's also from the UK, so she has that really nice British accent that I actually love to listen to. She's younger than me, she's 20 years old, but somehow when I'm listening to this podcast, it feels like I'm listening to an older sister or something like that. I mean, I wouldn't exactly know because I am the oldest, but I don't know, she just seems really mature and well-adjusted, and I've just learned a lot from her. I think she does a really great job at balancing the episodes between deeper topics and then more lighthearted topics, so that you can definitely pick what you're in the mood for. Next up is a business podcast titled How I Built This, and I actually found out about this podcast through a business class in university, and I ended up liking it enough to listen to more episodes than just the one that we'd been assigned. The host, Guy Ross, talks to successful people about the companies or movements that they've built, so you'll get to hear about how companies like Lyft and Patagonia, Instagram, Bumble, Airbnb, Microsoft, and many others were built, and it can actually be pretty interesting. The guests will talk about their successes and their failures, and there's something motivating and inspiring about hearing how really successful people have previously failed and have faced their challenges. I don't know why, but I feel like sometimes I forget that. I feel like my brain just assumes that they had it all together from the beginning, and it's a nice reminder that that's not always the case. And And the last podcast I'm recommending is Behind the Feed. It's hosted by content creator slash influencer Josie. I'll put up her Instagram on the screen here. If you're a content creator or you're looking to become one, I definitely recommend that you listen to this. But if you're neither of those things, it's not just a content creation podcast, so just hear me out. There's episodes where she shares her insights on planning and editing photos and how to work with brands, negotiating brand collaborations, how to increase your income with social media. Basically, all of the behind the scenes stuff, or behind the feed, like the title of the podcast suggests. All those things that content creators have to think about and do. I feel like even if you're not a content creator, you might still find this kind of stuff interesting. I think a lot of people think it's a really, really easy job, but there's actually a lot of stuff that goes into it. But like I said, it's not just social media stuff. So sometimes she'll talk about other things like building confidence, health, pursuing your passions, routines, and so on. So hopefully you'll find something that you like. And that's it. I hope you end up liking some of the podcasts. Feel free to leave some of your own suggestions in the comments. Maybe it'll become like a little section where we all discover new things to listen to. But thanks so much for watching. Hopefully I'll catch you in my next video.